everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to our third and final AI safety webinar on media literacy in the age of AI. My name is Rehana, and I'm a learning manager here at the Raspberry Pi Foundation. And I worked on designing the AI safety content that we released early 2025. And I'm very excited that you're here with us. Thank you for joining us, whether you're a teacher, a parent, an educator, a club leader, or anyone who would like to have conversations around AI safety with young people around them. In this webinar, I'll be talking about generative AI and misinformation and how media literacy actually needs to evolve to stay up to date with emerging technologies. We will give you the knowledge to explore AI and AI safety and AI privacy, and so that you can help young people become more informed, more thoughtful, and more empowered users of AI technologies. I'm also here joined by Emma, who's my colleague here at the Raspberry Pi Foundation. Emma, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm the newest member of the Raspberry, of the Experience AI team. And I was a teacher for 20 years before joining the team. And I'm really excited to be part of the team and part of writing these resources now.
We are very lucky to have you, Emma, on our team with a wealth of wisdom. We're also very lucky to have Gal with us today, who is joining from the other side of the world. And Gal, if we could get Gal on the stage. Hi, Gal. Great to have you on here today. Would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yes. Hi, pleasure to be here, and thanks for inviting me. So I was actually one of the lucky ones to see the ups and downs of AI. When I started my studies in machine learning, this was when AI was basically doomed. That's the old AI, like chess playing and things like that. Everyone said, okay, AI is gone. And they even made fun of machine learning, which is, okay, this is the new AI that would be gone in a decade. But I don't know, I was just curious and interested and did my PhD in that. And became a university professor at the Hebrew University doing machine learning, which is AI of today. And everyone is aware of the revolution, of course. So very lucky for me and very exciting. And in parallel to being at the university, I also lead a research team in Google, working on generative AI and in particular factuality. And also in the past few years, my passion is bringing AI to education. So everything is connecting for me, which is a lot of fun. Thank you for inviting me, and a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And we're gonna ask Gal a few questions throughout the whole webinar, and to ask you some questions about factuality and how that's done and how you look at it. So we're gonna keep you in the background now, and then we're gonna keep bringing you up on stage to keep asking you questions. Bye, Gal. All right, now over the next hour or so, I'll introduce the AI safety unit together with Emma, and we will talk about a session that we created called Media Literacy in the Age of AI. Now, the AI safety unit itself is part of our free resources called Experience AI, and Emma is actually going to tell us a little bit more about Experience AI.
So Experience AI is a really cutting-edge program of resources. It's very comprehensive, and it's for 11 to 14-year-olds. It's free as well, and it's for specialists and non-specialist teachers. So it's very easy to deliver because there's so much advice and so much guidance given along with all the different resources. So shall we go through the different areas? So our first offering really is the 6 lessons, which is the foundations of AI. And they go from really not expecting students to have any idea about what AI is. They can start from absolutely nothing and then work their way through understanding what AI is, the different types of AI model. They get to make their own learning model as well using machine learning for kids, which is a really fun activity. And they also talk about the benefits and limitations of AI as well. I actually taught this in school, so I can totally vouch for how good all the resources are. They come with lesson plans. There's a slide deck for every lesson, and those slide decks have got videos of the DeepMind Google researchers. So if you're a little bit if you're finding it a little bit tricky to describe some of these concepts, actually the Google researchers do that for you, which gives you a lot more confidence when you're teaching the lessons. There are worksheets, there are summative questions at the end of the 6 lessons as well, so you can measure your students' learning. So these are a really, really good set of lessons. They're also mapped so that all of the concepts build, so that it's taught in a really sensible order as well. Then there's a single lesson about large language models, and that teaches students about what these are, how to use them effectively, and also when they might not be quite right, might not give you the output that you would expect. There's a really exciting lesson about ecosystems in AI, and this has links with biology, Key Stage 3 biology, and it's a really interesting way of starting to think about how we can actually use AI across the curriculum. So we can obviously teach students about what AI is in computer science, but it's actually going to be used in lots of different subjects. And so this lesson approaches how to use AI in biology by looking at image recognition on the Serengeti. And then finally, we've got our 3 AI safety lessons, which Rohana is going to talk us through now.
Yes. So the AI safety unit is our newest set of resources. And just like everything else that we develop at the foundation, they're completely free. And the unit includes animated videos, it includes unplugged activities, enriched discussion prompts that are all guided as well. And they are designed to be flexible and easy to use in any setting, whether it's a classroom, an after-school club, home environment, code club, or any kind of environment where you're interacting with young people. And the AI safety unit is designed to help educators, parents, carers, and club leaders to help guide and teach 11 to 14-year-olds about important topics that are related to AI and AI safety. The unit itself is a standalone unit, so it's separate from the Foundations of AI unit that Emma just described. And it includes 3 lessons. So it includes a lesson on your data and AI. The other lesson is about media literacy in the age of AI. So that's the one that we're talking about today. And the third one is using AI tools responsibly. They can be taught in any order. So there is no particular order to these 3 sessions. And each lesson includes a video. It includes 2 unplugged activities and discussion prompts. It's up to you how you decide to mix and match the activities with the discussions. So you might do the activities with the discussions. You might only do the discussions or only the activities. So it's really up to you, and we have given you all the freedom to mix and match those activities in those lessons. And we designed it to give you as much flexibility to deliver these resources in any way that is most appropriate for you and your setting. Now, in our first 2 webinars, we explored how AI tools are becoming much more prevalent around young people, and we looked at some ways that young people could or should use AI tools responsibly. And then in the next session, in the second session, we looked at data and about how AI systems are driven by tons and tons and tons of data. Now, today, we will dive into the topic of how AI can be used to generate misinformation, from fake images to made-up news stories. And we will discuss why it's important, even now more than ever, for young people to have strong media literacy skills. I will also walk you through our unplugged activities for this lesson specifically, the media literacy in the age of AI lesson. And we will, and this lesson is designed to help young people recognize deepfakes and think more about, where sources of information are coming from and what kind of sources of information they are around them, but also to help them think critically about what they see online, and all of this without needing a device. So these are all the unplugged activities where you don't need a device for them. And finally, we will have Gal share some expert insights with us on factuality and misinformation as well. So let's begin to talk about what media literacy is. So traditionally, media literacy is when young people usually get taught these skills, and they're basic principles about how to navigate being online, right? And so they get taught some basic principles around media literacy, either in schools or at home. And these media literacy skills, they usually involve how to question sources and verify information, how to spot clickbait, especially on social media, and how to separate fact from fiction. But this all needs to evolve now with AI tools so prevalent around us. Because relatively recently, we have started to witness generative AI becoming much more easily accessible and prevalent around us, and especially young people. And we see generative AI tools as conversational chatbots that can generate images, videos. And with these tools, anyone can create content and media very quickly, very easily, and at scale. And they all can look very real. So they can look very hyper realistic. And that means that young people now might encounter content online that looks real, but actually isn't, like AI generated images. And fake news articles, or even AI generated videos without knowing it. And so it's not just about what young people see online and on social medias or in any other format, but also what they are able to produce with it right now, like posters, stories, images, and videos. And this can be super empowering, and this can be giving them such good skills, but it also raises important questions, right? Because we can't tell it's much harder to tell what's real, and it's much easier to spread misinformation. So how can we help young people make sense of what's happening around them? But also, how can we help them double check the accuracy of the information and the content that they come across online? And how can we help them create a set of expectations around fairness, around accountability, around transparency when it comes to using AI? And that's why these are such important questions to have and such important conversations to have, because how can we help young people double check the accuracy of content they come across online, and how can we help them build these expectations? Now, I hope that you see how important of a topic this is. So the lesson, media literacy in the age of AI, is all about that. And I'm going to show you, and I'm going to go through the lesson to show you what we have in that lesson to help you guide these conversations and to really help your students, your learners, the young people around you to have a better grasp of what's happening around them when it comes to AI tools and the platforms around them. I've queued up the video that we play at the start of the media literacy in the age of AI lesson. So let's watch it together.
The internet provides endless sources of information for you to choose from, ranging from news organizations to your favorite creators. Deciding the level of trust you place in online content is an important part of media literacy. Seeking multiple sources to double-check the facts and only sharing trustworthy information are essential skills in a modern world. You are growing up in a world where AI-powered tools make it easier to quickly produce high-quality media. So how should this change the way you consume and share information? Generative AI tools allow people to generate text, images, and videos that look extremely real. This could be used to create misleading material, called misinformation. The first step to generating something is writing a prompt, a description of what someone wants to create. Generative AI systems are created from lots of example data. The patterns found in this data allow the model to generate new content that reflects what the user has asked for. You might, for example, ask for a blog post about a historical event, or a video of a scientist sharing their findings. But you should know that generative AI does not always produce factual content. Instead, it prioritizes content that fits with what the user asked for. A blog post about a historical event would normally contain dates and references, so the AI model will probably include those in the output. But if the facts you ask for are not in the data, then it may generate fake ones. The model can only work with the information found in the training data or in the prompt. In the case of a blog about a historical event, the dates will look correct, but may not line up with the actual timeline. Make sure you double-check any generated output. What happens if a user asks for media that purposefully contains misinformation? Here's where things get tricky. Information included in the prompt will definitely appear in the output, even if it's wrong. The realistic content produced could then be used to influence public opinion about a topic. As AI tools get better, it will become more difficult to tell whether a piece of media is AI generated. Instead, you need to check information and find multiple sources before you accept something as fact. Sometimes people make content that provokes a strong emotional reaction because they're hoping that people will feel too angry, upset, or excited to double-check the information. In the future, hopefully more platforms will be transparent and clearly explain their use of generative AI, so people can decide whether to trust them or not. What sources do you use to get your news, and how likely are they to allow generative AI? In an AI-powered world, you can be a critical consumer. So what skills do you need to separate fact from fiction?
Thank you for the video. These videos are always really fun to watch. And if you have a chance to look at the rest of our resources in the AI safety unit, you will see that we have a video for every lesson of them. And they're designed to be a nice introduction to the topic, to mention some of the concepts that you're going to be covering in the lesson as well. And like you saw, this video is about how generative AI tools work and where the user can prompt the tool to generate text, for example, and the AI model draws information found in the training data and example data to generate content. Now, for young people, it's important to think critically about what misinformation is, and how AI can be used to create media that includes misinformation, whether that's deliberate or not. But also why generative AI might not always produce factual content like we just saw in the video. And then lastly, also what young people need to separate fact from fiction. So what kind of skills they need to be able to do that. These are very important concepts and topics to consider. And so that's why there is a post-video activity that I'll be showing you right now as well. And so in this post-video activity, we asked the learners to list what types of media can be generated using AI. And so if you look at the video, or if you have any experience using AI tools to generate content, you can tell that you can generate images, you can generate text, you can generate videos or code, or there are different formats and different kinds of media you could use generative AI to produce, to create media, to create content. And then after that, they look at a timeline of content creation with generative AI. And we asked them to look at the timeline and to decide at which point on the timeline AI tools could introduce inaccuracies. So Emma, if I ask you, for example, at which point in the timeline could an AI tool introduce inaccuracies?
An AI tool, so I would say that it might analyze the prompt wrong. So it might get the wrong idea from the prompt, and then the data that it's kind of trained on might either have inaccuracies or have missing data, might be biased. So maybe those two areas. And just to say, I love those videos. They're so brilliant. And what's really lovely is that because they've got this voiceover, they've been very easily translated into 23 languages. And so loads and loads of people can access them, which is really fantastic. But yeah, love them.
Yes, exactly. I forgot to mention it, but all the videos are translated in about 23 languages and counting, both the voiceover and the subtitles. So if you are showing this video in another language, or you have learners who speak a different language, then you can adjust that so you could have different videos in different languages. All right, so if we look at the misinformation timeline again, but now have a different lens. So we look at when people could create misinformation. So Emma, maybe I could ask you again, at what point could people introduce inaccuracies or create misinformation?
Well, I think maybe like from the video, when they write the prompt, if they're introducing loads of misinformation into that prompt, then they're probably going to be able to create misinformation as an output as well. And maybe if they edit the output as well, then that can probably create misinformation too. So
yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there are several instances where misinformation could be created, both from the side of an AI tool, but also from a human side. Now, this activity, this post-video activity, is designed to ensure that learners are all on the same page before they progress to one or both of the unplugged activities or even the discussion prompts. And these questions bring us back to our role as educators, and educators of all kinds, right? Because how can we help young people become more critical consumers of media in this current day and age? So I would like to bring Gao up to the stage again. Because Gao, I would love to ask you, how could young people balance the creativity that AI tools allow for while creating factual media? So how could that balance be accomplished?
Yes, thanks. This is the maybe the holy grail of the generative AI. So, and it's a hot topic, So first, I would say, fake news has been there forever. Dictators have been using it from the early age of civilization, and now we're coping with kind of two problems, right? First, everyone can create fake news. You don't need to be powerful anymore, right?
Yeah.
You just sit at your computer, you create fake news. You even make sure it reaches a lot of people. So that's one challenge. The other challenge is that generative AI is not perfect yet. So even when you don't try to do anything, you get some fake news or some misinformation, right?
Yeah.
So it's a double challenge. And I think because it reaches every single one of us, right, in order to be able to balance, we first of all need to be educated about it. It's not easy, right? I saw someone in the chat saying it's often hard to distinguish real from fake. So this is for everyone, whether you're young or old, literate or not. Educating is more about being aware of the problem and reducing the probability that you'll be fooled, right? It's not about being able to notice it, right? Just like, when I speak, right? If I wave my hand and, I talk with like, a lot of force, people will believe me more than if I kind of say I'm not sure. It's the same way with AI, right? You get long answers, they're beautiful pictures and so on, and you believe them more. So it's a real problem. And I think the first step really is to educate, preferably at an early age, to kind of understand, first of all, why it's important to be factual, right? Kind of imagine a world where everything would be fake and where it can happen, right? We're not far from it. Again, before 10 years ago, it was, people definitely delivered fake news, but it was harder, it was easier to detect. Now it's much easier. So why is it so important? Another thing is actually the limitations of the model, right? Kind of learn what is typical of a model. So for example, I think this was mentioned in the video, if you ask the model for a table of, let's say, countries and their GDP, right? And let's say that for some reason it doesn't have the information for some country, usually models will not say, I don't know, right? And in fact, humans also don't always say, I don't know when they don't know, right? This is something like you learn as a teacher, right? A great teacher knows how to say, I don't know.
Mm.
But models are not great teachers yet, right? And if you realize that, right, then you kind of say, okay, although the table looks correct and I check the first two lines, that doesn't mean the rest of the table is correct, right? So kind of learning about what works and what doesn't work, learning about the pitfalls of generative AI, that can help kind of have better critical thinking, I would say, of models. And in the same way that we educate for critical thinking when reading books, we need to educate about critical thinking of AI. And it's a different form of, it's an elegant form, not alien in the standard sense, but it is a new form of something that generates content, right? And that means we need to be critical about it. And so just realizing that you need to be critical, practicing that, and I think like everyone here has an important role in that. I think that's key. That's the most important thing. Because at the end of the day, when you see content, you need to decide, I want to balance creativity and factuality, right? If you don't want to balance, nothing will matter. And then if you do want to balance, there are a lot of tools out there. Right now, not too many, but there are things like double click checking in Gemini and in other models, deep research tools, thinking tools that kind of force the model to go and find more resources that substantiate what I say, right? And there will be more and more tools like that. But at the end of the day, it will be a human decision, right? There will be a lot of tools, but you as a person will have to suspect the information and want to double check it.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why it's so important that we use education to teach these skills, right? And like you said, a world that only has fake information would be a very scary one, and so that's why it's so important to have those media literacy skills and to understand the affordances and the limitations of AI tools, kind of like how you alluded to. You kind of mentioned this a little bit, where you said like we have responsibilities as users to fact check and to make sure that the information we are consuming is factual and correct. But if we zoom out a little bit and if we look at developers of generative AI systems, how important is factuality for people who work on generative AI systems and the developers of generative AI systems?
Yeah, another great question. And obviously, there is no one answer for all developers, right? But I would say that generally speaking, without factuality, we have nothing. And let me give an example. Okay, so how do you become 100% factual? You basically say nothing, right? That you can't go wrong, right? If you just don't say anything. But once you start saying things, right, mistakes will be made. Humans make mistakes as well, right? But we do want to give elaborate, long, thoughtful answers, which basically means that dealing with factuality goes hand in hand to being useful to the users, right? So think of all those companies developing generative AI systems. At the end of the day, right, they also care about just being factual in the sense of, it's better to be factual than unfactual. But these are companies that are there for money, right? And they will make money if the users are happy, and the users are happy if they get good answers, right? So ultimately, being factual is a way to survive, also in terms of the industry. It's not just about doing the right thing, although a lot of companies, also care about doing the right thing. But I'm saying, even if you just care about your business side, without factuality, you don't have quality. So first of all, that's like something to remember. I know there are like hiccups along the way because everything is new and some companies are taking advantage of that. But definitely the big companies care about factuality because they will lose the competition to others. And it so happens that, Google's, and now I'm speaking for Google, Google's mission is to deliver the world information. That has always been true. That was defined like by the founders before search. And to deliver the information, right, there's no point in delivering information that is not true, right? So that's really close to our heart in terms of actually standing beyond the mission of Google and saying, okay, here's the information and it's as accurate as possible. So that's one aspect in terms of just delivering good products to users. There is also another aspect which makes it important to developers and also to researchers like me, where there are actually a lot of interesting problems, right? And you see that in a lot of academic papers about factuality, a lot of leaderboards where different models are being compared, right? It's actually tricky. So factuality is not just about pure facts. So, if you say, okay, is Trump the current president of the US versus Obama, then it's a very precise fact that's easy to determine. But a lot of factuality is actually a lot more subtle. So, for example, if, let's even take it to the creative side, right? You tell, a student, okay, why don't you write a story about a boy in a farm? Okay. It sounds like you can do anything, right? Because it's a story and it's creative and it's fiction. But as soon as you say a boy on the farm, right, there are some rules here. There's some form of factuality that you need to follow. So factuality actually follows all the way from concrete facts to having some rules of the world that we need to follow. right? Or some requirements of the task that you give as educators and so on. And everything in between makes it a very ill-defined problem, which is great for researchers and developers, right? Because we want challenges, right? So, checking whether Obama or Trump or the president, that's relatively easy, right? Doing that for something a lot more subtle, including, a lot of maybe logical steps in between and creativity, that's very challenging because the models are not there yet, right? It's not just about giving a little more information. So that's also one of the reasons it's important. So we have the importance of just getting it right. We have the importance of research-wise. And then I think the importance actually grows every day because the basic answers are of higher quality, right? They look nicer, right? If you want to ChatGPT and Gemini just a couple of years ago, the answers were not well formatted. Now you have pictures, you have bullet points, things like that, right? The higher the quality of the surrounding stuff, the more emphasis is put on the actual content, right? And the actual content becomes everything. And if that's not factual, then everything is messed up, right? So in that sense, it's there. It's very much part of our life. I would say in my org, factuality is probably the biggest group that's dealing with factuality, and it's growing every day. So it's actually not diminishing.
If anything, that is reassuring to know, and that we won't be living in a world with fake news around us, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
Thank you for giving us that kind of perspective as well from the developer kind of from the side of the developers of these generative AI systems. We're gonna put Gal in the background again, but we're gonna bring you up again in a little bit to answer some more questions. Thank you, Gal. All right. So that was Gal telling us all about factuality, also from a human perspective, but also from the developer's perspective, from like the company perspective. So from a user and developer perspective. If we can go back to the resources again, I think Emma is going to tell us a little bit more about the pedagogy and how we designed our resources to also make it as easy as possible for our users to use our resources in a way that is accurate and helpful. So over to you, Emma.
Thank you. So all of the resources are based on research-driven pedagogy. And one of the big ones is semantic waves. And when you teach any kind of computer science, there are always big concepts that you need to get across to students. And this is a really nice way of doing it. So you introduce the complex concept to begin with, which is at the top of the wave. And then as you go down the wave, you would introduce an unplugged activity that would help the student break that concept down. And then going up the wave, you then link that unplugged activity back to the complicated concept to give them a really deep understanding of it. And it can create some really rich discussions within your classroom as well. The unplugged activity could be a metaphor or something like that, which allows them to kind of hook onto an existing mental model that they've got, again, which really helps them to understand the complex concept that you've tried to get across. So, for instance, when I was teaching, I would teach networks. I'd introduce them to packet switching, which is how data travels around a network. And then I'd take them down the wave and we'd talk about the London Underground tube system, which was lots of lines linked together, and then how the trains travelled around that. And then we come back and we'd link the two together. So we talk about how the data packets were like the trains that travelled around the tube. And we use this within the media literacy lesson when we talk about information sources. So first of all, Rahana will talk about this later, but they talk about where they get their information from. Then we break it down into different tasks of, well, would you use your source of information for this activity? And then we bring it back to trusted information. So that's one really important method. If we could go on to the next slide, then we can talk through some of the other pedagogy that we use. So we lead with concepts, and you can see at the bottom, the banners are coming up with links that you can use to actually access more information about these. But as I said at the beginning, we draw a concept map to link together lessons so that they're taught in a really sensible order, so that the students will build their knowledge up based on what they've learned in previous lessons. Then working together, using pair work, group work, so that the students can really discuss those concepts and build their mental models by verbalizing it, and even teaching it to each other is also very important. Unpacking, unplugging, and repacking is really using that semantic wave analogy again. It's really important to try and identify misconceptions before you start teaching about things like AI. And one misconception could be that they think that AI is like a sentient being, is like a human being, and it actually thinks and it learns and it understands. And it's very, very important to be able to describe to them that no, this is a technical system. It's not thinking, it's actually matching patterns. So taking those misconceptions and actually sort of attacking them head on is a really, really important thing to do as well. Also, misconceptions around how AI is really scary and it might take over the world, things like that, just to give them the confidence to know that's not actually the case. We're not there. And making things concrete by using things like machine learning for kids, which is a really nice platform where they can make their own learning models, is really important as well, because it can seem really abstract and quite a difficult thing to grasp onto what is happening in the background of these AI systems. But if they can make their own AI systems and they can actually see how bias can sneak in, it starts to make a lot more sense. So as much as you can, having concrete or having activities that make these abstract ideas concrete is also really important. So we're going to have a look at some discussion ideas now. So in the UK, this is quite commonly used, think, pair, share. So this is where we would ask the student to maybe think about something for 30 seconds on their own, talk to the person next to them about that particular topic. And then the teacher might do what's called cold calling, which is where you pick on students without them putting their hands up to actually share what they've been discussing about that area. Stand where I stand debate is where you might have a big poster saying yes on one side of your classroom and no on the other. And then you might have a question and the students have to actually get up and walk to what they think. So do they agree or do they not agree with that question? And then finally, a jigsaw activity is where you might have a group of children who they all are given sort of a different topic to be an expert in. You then send them off to their expert groups who all have the same topic to talk about, and they teach each other. They learn maybe by having some resources and worksheets you've given them. They learn about that topic and they go back to their home groups, and then they have to teach the rest of that group about that particular topic, which is brilliant because if you teach someone something, you have to really understand it. And so again, it just really helps them build up that mental model of the concept. So those are some really useful ideas there, I hope, that will help you with your lessons. Then back over to you, Rohana.
Thank you, Emma. So towards the final bits about the way that we structured the resources is about how we designed it to give you as much flexibility in running the activities and the lessons. So we recommend that you start with the video. So every lesson has a video, and for the media literacy in the age of AI lesson, we have the generative AI misinformation video, after which you can decide to do any of the following, which are the discussions, the unplugged activities, and you can have a mix and match of those as well. We have 2 unplugged activities that I will be showing you in a bit that will help young people build critical media literacy skills using these unplugged activities. And we know that these conversations around misinformation, AI-generated content feels kind of overwhelming, especially for young people who are still developing the cognitive tools to analyze what they see around them and to critically assess the content that they are consuming. And that's why we have these unplugged activity, is to facilitate an easy introduction into an otherwise complicated topic. So let me walk you through our the first of the unplugged activities in this session, called Trusted Sources. And the goal of this activity is to help young people reflect on where they get their information from and to determine how much they trust it. So we start by asking, what are the kind of sources that you consume information from online? And then we also ask them, where do they look up that information? So which source specifically? And this is a primer for the rest of the activity. So you want them to be able to readily recall the times that they looked for information online, but also remember the sources that they looked up this information from. And they may come up with specific sources like Instagram or YouTube or Wikipedia or blog posts that they or bloggers that they follow. And then you get your learners to vote on the most common online source, and then you get them to write those down on cards, on individual pieces of paper. And then in small groups, they will start sorting their sources into two columns, the trust or don't trust column. And this is to indicate whether they think whether the source that they're looking at is a good place to get accurate information from. And they can put them in the middle as well if they are unsure. So, for example, they might say that they would trust a news blog or certain channels on YouTube as a trustworthy source to find facts about a historical event to help with their homework, but maybe not so much social media. So social media would not be a reliable or trustworthy source for them to look up historical events to help with their homework. But the latest news about the release of an artist's album, definitely social media. And so social media becomes a much more reliable source for them to find out about the album release of their favorite artist. And so we do the same thing with a few different scenarios. And in each one, we ask them whether they would trust each of their sources, each of the 5 ones that they wrote, whether they would trust them with this specific scenario. So would they trust their sources to look up facts about the candidates in an election? So would they trust social media for that, for example, or would they trust that specific channel on YouTube? And then also information about a scientific discovery. And so we have them look at each of these scenarios and determine how much they would trust them and how much they would trust their sources to find out information. And then after that, the learners will explore how generative AI could have played a role in the content they see. And so we ask them which source is most likely to contain content generated by AI. And they're going to put them on a scale from least likely to most likely. And after they do this, they compare it against their original sorting of the sources when they had the column with the trust and don't trust column, and they put their sources in those columns. And so they compare that against how likely it is that their sources use generative AI to create content. And so this is all helping young people to think about, where are they getting information from? How likely is it that these platforms use generative AI? But also, if there is a link between trustworthiness and the likelihood of generative AI use. And that also links back to oversight and whether the amount of oversight influences how much we trust platforms. And so oversight, for example, is a very important conversation to have when it comes to these platforms that they consume on a daily basis, because oversight is a very important factor in determining the trustworthiness of content published online. So, for example, news organizations, they might have standards that they have to stick to, because otherwise there will be consequences and repercussions. But social media platforms, for example, are much more free to post anything you like, and there might not be consequences. And so this activity is all about reflecting on the trust that young people place in these information sources and the likelihood that these sources use generative AI and how that impacts their trust in these sources. It's a very fun activity. I run it multiple times. All right, the second unplugged activity we have in this lesson about media literacy in the age of AI is called Action Plan, and it builds on the video that we saw earlier as well. This time, learners will reflect on what they usually do with information they come across online. So usually they would read something and then decide to ignore it, or maybe they would share it, or maybe they would double check it, right? Especially if the content is very interesting or very controversial or even emotional. And so these three actions, share, double check, and ignore, these will be used throughout this activity called your actions. So share, double check, and ignore. Because what influences our actions towards information that we come across online? Is it the topic? Is it the source? Is it the presentation? Like if something is too good to be true, for example, would that decide or change how we interact with that information? And so this activity goes on to explain what generative AI is, and that as these tools become much more popular, they might learners might actually increasingly more often come across AI-generated content online. And we have them think about whether the use of generative AI would change their actions. So something that they might have shared before because it looked or sounded ridiculous, for example, or funny, they might now decide to ignore. And so we present them with several scenarios as well. And then some of these scenarios are very relatable to them, especially to that age group. So in this scenario, for example, we have a social media video about a celebrity's bad behavior. And we asked them what they would do with this information. Would they share it? Would they double check it? Or would they ignore it? And it's very important to discuss and to emphasize the element of credibility when it comes to these scenarios or these platforms that they are consuming this information from, right? And then we have an element of we have an AI-powered twist, as you might call it, to this activity, where every scenario is followed by a AI-powered tool called Check AI that will share and that will tell you how much AI was used in producing this piece of content. So we have this fictional AI checking company that will tell you how AI was used to make this video. And in this case, for example, the audio in this video had been partially generated by AI for the purpose of reenactment. And so we have them check their action again. So maybe they might have shared it before, but now that because there is some generative AI used, maybe now they will double check it or they will look at it a little bit more closely. And now the reality is that recognizing how and where generative AI has been used will just become much and much harder as time goes on and as these tools become much better at generating very realistic content. So we asked learners to define what their own line is, like what their own boundaries are, and when they think it is acceptable to use or to share AI-generated content. And so this is their chance to think about how important transparency is to them and come up with ideas for how they would like to see transparency on platforms. And also what they could and should expect from the platforms that they use around them. And so the questions that we asked in this activity are how much or how would they want the information to be presented? And what do they want to know about the use of generative AI? And both the questions that we asked in this activity and the one before that, they lead in really well with the discussion points. So depending on whether you want to use the discussion points or even if you want to use the unplugged activities, the discussions are also there to facilitate this these conversations with the young people around you. And so you might ask them about, who is responsible for fact-checking information when it comes to various types of media. And Gal kind of referred to this, right? Is that we have a responsibility as a user, but that companies that are hosting this information also have a sort of responsibility as well. And then what you want to draw out from these discussions is the need to separate fact from fiction, for example, or the need for transparency by companies and individuals, and also the need to be a critical consumer of artifacts. And ultimately, the key message from the discussions is that you want young people to be critical consumers of information and content, and to be able to separate fact from fiction, but also to be an ethical consumer. And this takes me to the last bit, which is, media literacy in the age of AI. What does it look like, right? So we talked about all the resources and about how you could have these conversations and build these skills. But ultimately, how does that look like in the age of AI? So I would like to bring Gal up to the stage as well. Hello, Gal. Because we have a few concluding questions for you, and I will give it over to Emma to ask the first one.
Thank you. So, what role do generative AI tools play in the future of online platforms and media?
Okay, that's an easy question to answer in like 2 or 3 words. It's, I would say, definitive and comprehensive. So, think of spell checker, right? We basically don't output anything without spell checking anymore, right? There's no reason we would create any content without going through AI. That's a given. And I mean, my generation is still a little hesitant, right? The younger generation is going to view that as an obvious thing to do. So we should assume that the vast majority of information will be either AI created or AI assisted, right? So that doesn't mean humans are not in the loop, right? But humans will actually even consult AI on things they write on their own, right? So even people who will want to say, I'm going to write it, they'll take a pic, snip. So that's inevitable, and it's fun. It's like any tool that we had in history. And I think what is going to be unique is that we're going to see more and more superhuman capabilities. So there are many, many things where it's not about being more intelligent. Computers just don't forget. They don't sleep. They're faster, right? So there are things we couldn't do in the past that will be put out there as if they came from us, right? And that's part of the reality that we'll have to deal and cope with. And going back to the theme of this webinar, just watch out for the factuality issues that will come with it.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it, that we teach the students that they've got to fact check what comes out of the generative AI just in case, and also that they don't lose their human skills. So we're teaching them how to use these AI systems effectively, so that they can get the most out of them, but they also know their limitations as well. So yeah, thank you, Gal.
So kind of carrying on from that conversation as well, which is about the limitations and about the critical thinking skills that we would like young people to have. But ideally, everyone who is consuming information online, I would say. And that brings me to the next question, because how important are media literacy skills now in an age when AI tools and generative AI tools are so widely available?
So almost hand in hand with the fact that it's going to be comprehensive, right, is the fact that you need to be there, right, in terms of knowledge. And I think this, I would probably say along a few different axes, not just one. So first of all, if the way we converse is mediated through AI, and, in many ways, my kids already converse through WhatsApp, and more AI and I will be part of that. So AI is going to become kind of the lingua franca, right? It's no longer going to be exactly English. And in fact, many people who are not fluent in English are going to have an advantage again, right? Because right now they don't need to know English. They need to know how to use AI to generate English or any other language. So in that sense, it's a good thing, right? Things are more equitable, but you need to learn it. You need to use it in order for it to be equitable. So I think, it is going to become the language, because most of the things are going to be generated through AI. So it's a different kind of language. And in fact, I don't know exactly how, but humans tend to invent new ways to be human. This goes back to what Emma said. And, there will be fresh language, just like emojis popped up on the social media, right? And, I don't understand half the emojis that the kids are running, between themselves, but they do. And so, you will have to be literate or you'll be left out socially. That's inevitable.
Yeah.
And it's moving fast. That's, I think, the big challenge. It used to move much slower, so that you had kind of a few years to catch up. And now things change in a matter of 1 year, maybe less. And of course, aside from social, so that's maybe the second axis. And then the third axis is professional, right? More and more professionals will rely on AI. And it's not just, in Google. It's even if you have I don't know, a massage parlor, right? Then all the content that you'll create in your website, right? People will expect that to be shiny and nice and up to date. And that will happen through AI. So something very human, right? Very personal and seemingly unrelated to AI, you will need to be able to use AI in order to be part of the game. So definitely as an engineer, by the way, I think we'll lose our jobs before others. And coding is very definitive. Uh, but the human part of that will need to know how to use AI, right? And to me, by the way, on a personal note, I said at the beginning, I'm excited about education, right? To me, like AI surrounding the teacher and allowing the teacher to be more human, that's the dream. It's
Yeah.
yeah. It's the one task where when I ask like student, what is a good teacher about, right? Some of it is about the way they teach, but a lot of it is about the human, right? The empowering, they believe in me, they're there for me, and so on.
Yeah.
Right. So a human assisted by AI, that will be the reality for, I think, almost any profession.
Mhm. Yeah. And it's very interesting because we don't know how the future of all these jobs will look like just yet. We only have these estimations and these predictions.
Yeah.
But that AI literacy is a very big part of it, to be able to navigate towards that future a little bit more easily.
Yeah, I think we should view it as a basic skill, just like critical thinking or collaboration or communication. It's another skill that's now basic. It's no longer luxury.
Yes, totally, totally. Yes, and I'm also very excited about the ability of AI tools to kind of like democratize access to information and maybe democratize education a little bit as well. So we should carry on that conversation hopefully another time, Gal.
Cool.
And then zooming in a little bit out for our last question is that you kind of referred to this already, that there are some challenges around factuality and about how industry is handling them. So this is what the last question is what are some of the major challenges in factuality today that you can tell us a little bit about, and how is the industry trying to solve these challenges?
Yeah, so that's a very broad question. So let me try and give the short version, and then time permitting, you can ask me to deep dive on more if you want. So I would say I would divide it more or less into three areas: technical challenges, human challenges, and then how do we solve them. So technical challenges, there are many. Just to give one example, for example, there are conflicting sources, and it's out there on the internet, right? On the internet, you can find websites that say the world is flat and websites that say the world is round. So how do you make sense of those? There is also sometimes inherent, uncertainty. Like, how do you rock a baby to sleep? There is no single answer. And I know that humans want a single answer, especially if you're a parent right now rocking your kid. But, the true answer is actually grayish, and it has lots of, sub answers and so on. So there are many challenges like that are about the actual inherent vagueness of factuality, right? When we think of factuality, we kind of think as a 0-1 thing, but it's actually not. So that's like an inherent technical challenge. And then there is the human challenge, which is, as humans, we want to believe it, right? When people like go to ChatGPT or Gemini, they get an answer, they tend to accept it as a given because it's written black and white, and we say, okay, this, it's a machine, it's not supposed to cheat, but it's not about cheating, right? It's not just about not being accurate. So we want to believe it, and the nicer it is, with the more images that we have, the more structured it is, and this was mentioned before, we believe it even more, right? So, and then at the same time, there are those who will take advantage. So this goes back to, I think, like the beginning of the discussion, and all of these create a human challenge. And I don't know, human challenges are tough, so I don't have an answer to that, but it is a challenge, right? So what do we do in order to try to solve this? So I think mostly we put a lot of engineers, researchers, product people, educators, psychologists, and other people to work on it. Really, the amount of people that work on that in any big company, and this is true for Google, but not just Google, right, is huge because everyone realizes this is of crucial importance. I also think it's very important, and this is not talked about as often as it should, is to set expectations and be transparent, right? Like, humans also make mistakes. The models know a lot more, so they can make a lot more mistakes. We kind of need to be, it's okay to say, I don't know. We should be transparent about where we suspect the model may be wrong. So going back to what the kids could do to balance things, right? Give the people who want to balance things more tools in order to know that something may be wrong. And I think that's very important. So, because perfection is not going to be there. It's, there's also no, like, some truths are not even objective, right? They're subjective. So unless you write the full 100-page essay on every single question, there will be things that are not definitive. And I think part of finding that balance of what is factuality, what are we guaranteeing, giving links, going back to trusted sources that you mentioned before, right? Those are all kinds of ways to cope with this.
Yes. Yeah, this is all to, to emphasize how important it is to have these conversations with each other, and to think deeply about these skills as well, and to develop them actively as well. So thank you so much, Gal.
Thank you.
All right, just as we wrap up today, I would like to leave you with this thought, which is that being media literate in the age of AI isn't just about spotting fake or AI generated media, because that's becoming much more harder to do so. But it's about empowering young people to ask questions, to think critically, and to demand transparency from the platforms that they use. And so I hope that from this webinar that you took away is that media literacy in the age of AI is a foundational skill. Gal referred to this so many times as well, is that it's so important to have these good, strong media literacy skills, especially in the age of AI, that will help young people navigate this world, this digital world, in a much more informed way and empowered way. The second point that I hope you take away from this webinar is that young people need support, and they need help questioning the world around them, and questioning what they see, what they interact with, and what they create, especially when it comes to AI tools. And lastly, you don't need to be an AI expert. We develop these resources to help you as much as we can to have these conversations, to help them navigate this world, and to do all these activities to guide you step by step. And so with AI tools becoming much more accessible than ever, it's important that we support young people in not just using them, but also questioning them and using them responsibly to become those empowered users of AI technologies. And through this lesson on media literacy in the age of AI, I hope that you feel inspired to open up these powerful discussions and give learners the space to explore where their boundaries are and how they want to engage with the online and digital world around them. And remember, media literacy skills in the age of AI aren't just nice to have, they're actually very important to have, just like all the conversations that we just had with Emma and Gal. With your support, young people can build the confidence and the curiosity and the critical mindset they need to thrive in this AI-powered world. Thank you so much for joining us. On behalf of my team as well, I would like to thank you for being here with us. I saw the comment section being very active as well, so I will have a look at that too. If you wanted to check out our AI safety resources, the link is over here, is rpf.io/AI safety-webinar. And if you would like to get in touch, please do. We love hearing from people who use our resources, and you can do that at aiprojects@raspberrypi.org. Again, thank you so much for being here with us today. And we hope
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Gab. Thank you for being here.